How does one person build a cabin from nothing? No power tools, no metal fasteners, no shortcuts, just raw timber, hand tools, and 7 days alone in the forest. A blade gets fitted into a wooden hand plane. A beam hardens over open flame. A drill bit bores a clean hole through solid wood. 3 quick beats, and the skill level is clear. Disc shingles will be cut by the hundred. Pegs will be driven by mallet into every joint. A door frame will be assembled without a single nail. And when the first rain falls, the roof will hold. The transformation starts here, in a dirt clearing, deep in the trees. The terrace took shape one swing at a time. Pickaxe into the steep bank, hands into the roots. The pile of excavated dirt tells the whole story. She steps back and surveys the cleared slope. The site is ready. With the terrace cut, she needed timber. She walked into the forest to find it. Tall trees, dappled light, leaf-covered ground. 2 large moss-covered stumps marked good source. The hand saw bit into the first log. The machete cleared branches from a fallen trunk. She worked her way through the timber, cut by cut. Then she shouldered the load and headed back. Part 1. Build an A-frame cabin in the woods. The first log came in across her shoulders, heavy, reddish-brown earth under her feet, the steep embankment rising behind the clearing. She trimmed branches from a standing trunk with the machete, then drove a wooden stake into the ground with a metal hammer. Rope tied around a pole, the footprint marked. A saw cut through the first thick log. The axe split the next. By the time the time-lapse rolled, the site was committed. Post holes came next. She knelt and drove the shovel into the dirt. The saw notched each log end. A deep, narrow hole in the ground, the frame's anchor point. Then she whittled a wooden stake to a point with her knife. The base was set. No metal fasteners. The frame would hold itself together with pegs. The auger bored into the upright log, wood shavings piling up. She cranked it by hand, steady and patient. The machete shaved thin strips from the peg stock. 4 cylindrical pegs laid out in a row on the dirt. Then a hand pressed the first peg into its hole. Friction fit. No glue, no bolts. The joinery was the structure. A single peg stood in its hole on the horizontal log. The frame was beginning to take shape. She walked across the clearing. Logs laid out, the hillside cut back. Saw blade into a thick log. Sawdust flew. Two carved log ends aligned and fitted together. A small axe tapped the peg home. The A-frame skeleton rose from the terrace. The auger went back to work, drilling cross-member holes. Shiny metal, wood shavings, the slow turn of the crank. Each log fitted into its joint by hand. She moved into the forest for more material. Machete clearing bark from a standing trunk. Light wood underneath, straight and sound. She climbed to reach what she needed. The frame kept growing. A bundle of long poles came in over her shoulder, down a muddy forest path. She stacked them on the clearing floor. Freshly cut, light color. Held one up against the A-frame to check the fit. The saw cut a notch into the next log. Poles arranged across the rising frame. The gathering phase was almost done. Horizontal rails needed drilling before they could be fitted. The auger again, hole after hole, sitting on a log. The machete carved notches where the joints would land. She lifted a large beam onto the frame. Hands pressed a pole into its joint. Each piece locked the last one in place. Long poles lifted into position on the rising frame. The sight spread across the hillside clearing. Dense trees, steep earthen bank, the skeleton taking shape. Mallet driving a wooden peg into the last horizontal log. The A-frame skeleton was complete. The frame stood. Now it needed a foundation beneath it. She dug into soft, muddy ground near the stream. A wooden tool worked the wet clay loose. She shaped the mud into balls with her hands. One after another, a growing pile around her. Flat stones gathered nearby. She pressed the first stone into the mud base. The fireplace foundation had begun. Stone by stone, the circular structure climbed, mud between each layer, hands pressing each flat stone firm. The chimney grew taller, cylindrical, packed tight. By the time the time-lapse ran, it had set solid. The mud held. Back on the frame, fitting the last structural pieces. She sat on the A-frame itself, auger in hand, drilling a pole. A high-angle view showed the whole site from above. Then a different task entirely. A large fallen trunk on the forest floor. She knelt beside it with a saw. Sawdust on the leaves. Slow, deliberate cuts. Circular wooden slices dropped to the ground one by one. The roof shingles had their source. Hundreds of disc shingles, cut from a single fallen trunk. She stacked them into tall vertical piles on the leaf-covered slope. A second stack, then a third. She balanced a large stack on her shoulder and walked to the site. Set them down beside the bamboo A-frame. The machete trimmed each disc to fit. The roof was next. Each disc needed a hole and a peg before it could go up. Hand drill into the center. Wood shavings on the mud. Mallet driving a small peg into the pre-drilled hole. Disc after disc, a growing collection on the muddy ground, each one pegged and ready. She climbed the side of the bamboo frame holding the first disc. Pressed it against the slat. The shingling had started. Row by row, the discs overlapped up the roof. She worked from the bottom edge toward the ridge. Then the rain. Water hit the shingles and ran off. Every overlapping disc did its job. The roof shed the rain. The inside stayed dry. She stood back and looked up at what she had built. A green tarp draped over the ridge as extra protection. She gathered the last loose discs from the mud, held two in her hands and looked at the frame. From inside, the forest canopy showed through the gaps. The roof was done. She reached up and pressed the final shingles into place. Overlapping rows. Light brown wood on bamboo slats. Clean, tight, weatherproof. The completed cabin stood against the dirt bank, banana trees and dense forest on all sides. Part 2. Awning, door, bed, and a bath. The backpack hung inside on the wooden frame. Shingle roof above. Exposed roof wall behind. She walked down to the stream. The shelter was built. Now she would live in it. Late afternoon light faded inside the cabin. Grass swayed against an orange sky outside. Then dark. A fire burned inside the mud fireplace. Tall orange flames. Warm light on the mud walls. She sat on a log in front of it, brushing her hair. First night in the finished shelter. Meat on bamboo skewers over glowing red embers, browned and glistening in the firelight. She sat on a mat inside the dark cabin, working by the glow of the fire. The forest was quiet outside. Day 2. She headed back into the forest. A small white puppy dug in the dirt near the cabin entrance. She picked up the axe and walked the forest path, swung it into a tree branch, carried the pole back. The cabin stood solid in the clearing behind her. The bed frame needed lumber, straight, smooth logs. She sawed them on the ground in front of the cabin. Several logs laid out in the dirt, ready to be sized. Then she moved them inside, held each one against the frame to check the fit. The bed was taking shape. By the time the time-lapse rolled, the logs were cut and stacked. peg after peg driven into the bed frame joints. Axe, mallet, axe again. Each strike locked a plank into place. She sawed the final logs to length outside, then arranged them on the floor inside. The floor and bed frame were coming together. Wall logs went in next. She crouched and pressed each one into position against the frame. A knife carved the fit where the joint was tight. Log by log, the open sides of the cabin began to close. The interior was taking on its final shape. The hut stood against the muddy embankment. Shingled roof, vertical log walls, jungle pressing in on all sides. Inside, she hammered stakes into the packed earth floor. The fireplace was visible on the left, the front still open. She carried a heavy log in from outside and fitted it to the wall. Small axe adjusting the joint. Then she sat outside and sawed a thick log between her legs. Door frame lumber. Smooth planks went up against the wall. Light wood, clean surface. She held each board in place and checked the fit. The fireplace framed the left side of the interior. The puppy watched from the dirt outside. A saw cut through the last log. The floorboards spread across the ground. Flat, smooth, raised above the dirt. Hammer driving the floorboards down, one by one. The shingled roof held above. Log walls on both sides. Outside, she cut and carved holes for the door frame, each one shaped by hand with a knife. The floor was solid. The door was next. A green snake moved through the branches above the work area. She didn't stop. The door frame went together on the dirt ground, mallet driving pegs into the mortise joints. She stood and held the frame up, solid. Wooden slats laid side by side across it, each one fitted and adjusted by hand. The door was complete. The door hung in the entrance. Slatted wood fitted into the log frame. She scrubbed the exterior logs with steel wool, climbed up to adjust the roof shingle, then stepped back. The cabin was sealed. Door, floor, walls, roof. A shelter built entirely by hand. Part 3. A bad day. A big tiger. She lay on the wooden bed platform inside the hut. Backpack on the wall. Dim light through the shingles. Outside, the stream ran past the cabin entrance. The forest was close on all sides. Something was out there. She took a long pole into the deep forest. Green canopy above. Fallen leaves underfoot. Rope tied around a wooden pole in the undergrowth. A secondary structure built away from the cabin. The tiger threat was not abstract. She worked the poles into position in the dense forest, machete shaping each stake to a sharp point. The finished stake drove into the ground. By the time it was done, a ring of sharpened stakes stood in the undergrowth. Then she returned to the cabin. Part 4. Rushing into danger. Hunting at night in the swamp. A headlamp beam cuts through the dark. Murky water, aquatic plants, shadows. She stands in the shallows holding a long wooden pole. The hunt is already underway. The spear started as a straight branch. She knelt in front of the cabin and worked it with a bushcraft knife. Long strokes, wood chips on the ground. The pole thinned and smoothed under the blade. She had been carving for a while. The shaft was almost ready. Three sharpened prongs lashed to the end of the pole. Twine bound them tight against the shaft. She held the finished spear up in front of the cabin. 3 points. One weapon. The night hunt had its tools. Dark swamp, headlamp beam on murky water, tall grass on both sides. The spear moved through the shallows, probing the water, slow and steady, waiting for the right moment. She had it, a large catfish held up in the swamp light. The hunt paid off. Back at the cabin, the moonlit sky showed through the slatted roof. The night was almost done. Dawn. She cleaned the fish on the stream mat. A dark night to a raw, pink flesh. Flat wet sand, flowing water around her knees. Several large catfish laid out in a green banana leaf. She worked through each one. The fish were ready to cook. cabin stood in the clearing. Door closed. Roof tight. She knelt outside and stacked flat stones near the entrance. Mud-covered stone pressed onto stone. A low wall rising from the dirt. The outdoor fire area was taking shape. Green bamboo split down the center with a heavy knife. Strip after strip came free. She knelt in front of the cabin, surrounded by split bamboo. The grill mat needed material. She had it. Thin bamboo strips woven into a flat grill, over and under, row by row. She worked without looking up. The mat grew under her hands, tight even, strong enough to hold fish over a fire. Embers glowed in the fire pit. She laid the fish on the woven bamboo mat, golden brown skin, smoke rising. She turned each piece over the heat. The smell of cooked fish filled the clearing. The fish came apart on the banana leaf, golden, cooked through. A small pile of white rice beside it. She sat on a log in front of the cabin and ate. 7 days of work behind her. A sealed cabin, a warm fire, a caught and cooked meal. Built from nothing but forest, hand tools, and patience. Some things are worth the long road back.